What's going on, guys? It's Michael here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. Today I've got a brand new remastered build for you. Last time we gave you the choice between the Pathfinder build and the Daedra Priest, and the consensus seemed to be pretty clear. This week's build is the Daedra Priest, completely overhauled and fully remastered in terms of roleplaying, the backstory and the playstyle. The Daedra Priest is a scholar of the darkest forces in Tamriel. He learned of the ominous Daedra occupying the Plains of Oblivion and he was engrossed. The priest will go to any lengths to acquire each and every Daedric artifact that he can and isn't afraid to trick even the most wretched deities in the process. He utilizes his skills to summon deadly Daedra, all while wielding supernatural Daedric artifacts to devastate his foes. When enemies see the Daedra Priest coming, it would appear as if the gates of Oblivion have reopened in Skyrim. The mixture of unique Daedric weapons as well as a variety of conjuration and destruction spells make this build incredibly versatile and never repetitive. While this build uses tons of artifacts, a mace is a staple in his playstyle, and you'll often be switching between an enchanted Daedric mace and the sensational mace of Molag Bal. If you want to know how to acquire this incredibly powerful weapon and also learn every single detail about it and how you can optimize it for your playthrough, head over to Camelwork's channel as he has just released a guide all about this weapon. While you're there, be sure to subscribe as he's producing very detailed guides on all the amazing weapons Skyrim has to offer, and tell him that FudgeMuppet says hello. There's a link to his channel down in the description below. Beware of the puns. Now, before we jump headfirst into this epic build, don't forget that you can decide which build comes next by heading down to the comments and voting for your favorite. This week the choices are the Pathfinder and the Druid. As always, timestamps to help you find your way around the video can be found in the description below, but now it's time to get into the Daedra Priest's race, standing stone and stats, and after that we'll get into the backstory. The Daedra Priest is a dark elf from the land of Morrowind. He is naturally gifted in the arcane arts and starts with +10 destruction, which will be incredibly useful for his playstyle. As a member of the Dunmer race, he has two unique abilities, the first of which is called Ancestor's Wrath. With this ability, for 60 seconds a day, any opponents who get too close to the priest will take 8 points of fire damage per second. His second ability gives him 50% resistance to fire permanently. This is very useful. As with many of our Skyrim builds, you'll want to get the Atronach Stone as it is arguably the best option. With this, the Daedra Priest will have an extra 50 points of magicka and will have 50% spell absorption. This means there's a 50% chance that an incoming spell cast against you won't damage you and will instead be absorbed into your own magicka pool. This makes it far easier to survive when fighting against other mages. In exchange, his magicka regeneration is reduced by 50%, which is not actually a big deal. During the early levels, it may be wiser to opt for the Mage Stone or the Lover Stone, as they will significantly improve your leveling speed. As for the Priest's stat spread, we suggest putting 60% into health and 40% into magicka. The 60% of health will be important for keeping you alive, as the build only uses gauntlets and boots of a heavy armor set. 40% will go towards magicka in order to allow you to get the most out of your many destruction and conjuration spells. Over time, you'll be able to significantly reduce your casting costs with enchanting and perks, but we chose not to use Fortify Conjuration as an enchantment, instead focusing on Fortify Destruction and Fortify One-Handed. Conjuration tends to just be used at the very beginning of a battle, summoning reinforcements before switching to Destruction and One-Handed. The Daedra Priest was born in the city of Blacklight on the mainland of Morrowind. He was raised by two parents who were heavily into the worship of the Reclamations, which involves Boethia, Azura, and Mephala. The Daedra Priest was encouraged to follow the devout ways of his parents, and he loved to learn about the three Daedra and the histories revolving around them and his people. His parents urged him to learn as much as he could, however the teachings given to him were very hand-selected, catered towards convincing him of why the Reclamations were so great. His parents meant well, and they always encouraged him to learn more in his own time. They valued independent learning greatly, however they didn't realize that they were ignorant to other information which existed. They would often frequent the library in search of more knowledge, but subconsciously only chose to read the books which appeared to agree with their beliefs. They were relatively kind people and had no intention of misleading their child. Due to the importance they placed on self-taught learning, they encouraged the Daedra Priest to visit the Blacklight Library. His parents were often distant due to labor commitments and couldn't spend all day lecturing him on the Reclamations anyway. As the Daedra Priest finished most of the books his parents had recommended, he started to pick some for himself. He didn't have the same subconscious bias that his parents had, and so he started to read about all the Daedra and investigate more about the history of his people. He started to learn more and more about the Tribunal, which then led him to investigate Azura in greater depth. part of him was quite confronted by what he was reading. The raw facts didn't have the same framing which his parents surrounded their teachings with. It seemed to him like Azura was not a Daedric prince to be worshipped and respected. He continued his research over a long period of time in order to discover the truth. He was still young at this time and could not read as fast as his parents, although his pace and comprehension were still very impressive for his age. The Daedra Priest read a lot about the golden age of the Dunmer and started to believe that the tribunal helped his people more than the Daedra ever had. He questioned his parents on the topic, but they disregarded his input and scolded him for his suggestions. The Daedra Priest, however, was slowly starting to doubt his parents, as the more he read, the more he realized that they didn't see the full picture. It was ironic that they had driven him to be so independent that they would eventually lose much of the common ground they'd shared for so long. Through studying the development of Dunmer civilizations even more extensively and continuing to read of Azura, he began to despise her. Azura had cursed his people all because of the tribunal, and he was not impressed. Eventually, he also decided to read a more common book which he'd never bothered with. He borrowed an old dust-covered leather-bound book titled The Battle of Red Mountain. Despite being one of the Dunmer traditional good princes, Azura's cruel involvement in this saga soured the priest's opinion of her even more. She seemed like the typical antagonist in the book, and he disliked her for it. When he reached maturity, the Daedra Priest traveled to the island of Vardenfell to see the Red Mountain and the ruins of Old Vivec City for himself. As a history buff, he researched some of the events which had impacted this old city and truly began to realize just how powerful the Daedra were. He also read other books which fascinated him greatly, such as those about the Oblivion Crisis, and he knew that his education on the Daedra was truly just beginning. While the Daedra Priest was very happy about his ability to learn, he was a little disappointed that his parents had been so wrong. But what if he was still missing something that they knew? He decided to pray to Azura for answers, and spent most of his nights during his travel in prayer. Azura, however, never answered his calls. This angered him greatly and cemented the hatred in his mind towards her. Upon returning back to Blacklight, his family had friends over who were refugees who went to Skyrim but had decided to come back. Over dinner, they mentioned a great shrine of Azura that existed in Skyrim, and said that people here could come to speak to the Daedric Prince. The Daedra Priest wanted to find out for himself and wasted little time planning. He wasn't going to seek her out for the truth, however, because he knew all that he needed to. He simply wanted to challenge her, and if possible, cause her pain without dying in the process. He headed to Skyrim, taking many detours, including one to the shrine of Hermaeus Mora in the Drow Mountains. He had retired to a local inn in Bruma after visiting the shrine, and he then planned to journey across the border and into Skyrim. The next morning, he went to the stables to rent a horse for the journey, packing nothing but the bare essentials and a stack of Daedric books. Everything had panned out just as the priest had foreseen, until on the border of Cyrodiil and Skyrim, he was ambushed and captured by Imperials under the assumption that he was working with the Stormcloaks, an organization he had no idea existed until the accusations were laid on him. After escaping Helgen with his head still anatomically attached to his shoulders, the Daedric Priest will continue on his quest. He will track down the Shrine of Azura, and upon arriving here he will feel quite intimidated. He will play the double agent role, swearing allegiance to her before betraying her for the Black Star. The Daedra Priest will love doing this. After this, he will seek out other Daedric princes to find out how he can escalate his power and knowledge. He becomes more power hungry because of the Daedra, and the idea of obtaining more artifacts seems much more realistic due to the fact that he now possesses the Black Star. He will track down each Daedric shrine and each Daedric presence in Skyrim before offering himself to be their respective champion. He will use each of them to acquire their Daedric artifact, but will remain loyal to one or two of his choosing. Depending on which prince inspires the Daedra Priest's loyalty, the way in which you roleplay him will be impacted differently. The one guarantee, however, is that it will most definitely not be Azura. The Daedra Priest's primary target is the acquisition of the artifacts. If he wishes, he can full and double cross princes to take advantage of them while remaining loyal to those he respects. The Daedra Priest will learn the true purpose of his destiny during his travels through Skyrim, and will thus take it upon himself to fulfill the Dragonborn prophecy. As a result, he will complete the main storyline. He will also attend the College of Winterhold. As a Dunmer with a thirst for knowledge and a genetic talent for magic, the college is too tempting a prospect to pass up for the Daedra Priest. He will also complete complete the Dragonborn DLC, and while doing so he'll collect all of the black books in order to add them to his Daedric artifact collection and to learn the lost knowledge of Hermaeus Mora. The Dawnguard DLC is optional, and your choice of faction in this will depend heavily on the Daedric Prince you devote your loyalty to. You don't want to become a vampire if the Daedric Prince you worship hates vampires. We highly recommend reading up on the prince that you align yourself with to ensure that you carry out their will effectively. Now that we're familiar with what motivates the Daedra Priest, let's have a look at what skills, spells, perks, and playstyle he utilizes to stay alive in the constant presence of danger and dark forces. So the skills for this build are Conjuration, Destruction, Enchanting, One-Handed, Heavy Armor, and Smithing. Conjuration will be used for summoning Atronachs and other Daedra to battle alongside you, before switching to destruction spells like Thunderbolt to be used to cause direct damage in combat. Shock spells also reduce the magicka of your target. These destruction spells will be placed in your left hand with a one-handed weapon, always basically a mace, in your right hand. It's a very classic battle mage setup in terms of offense. Investing in heavy armor will ensure that you get the most out of your Daedric armor pieces, and smithing is used to create them and also to improve their armor rating. Lastly, enchanting will be important to give destruction and one-handed benefits to every piece possible of the Daedra Priest's equipment. Use whatever other enchantments you like for slots in which those two enchantments can't be used. Our Daedric mace will also be enchanted. The Daedra Priest will opt for the Thunderbolt and Chain Lightning destruction spells. With the former, he will have a consistent damage-dealing projectile attack to use against enemies outside the range of his mace. This dishes out heaps of damage to health and magicka, however the cost is high for the damage it causes when compared to Chain Lightning. This spell is also ranged and offers area of effect damage, useful for taking down large groups of bunched together foes. Chain Lightning has the ability to leap from one target to the next, and while it doesn't do as much damage as Thunderbolt, it costs much less to cast, and will be a staple of your endgame setup. As for conjuration spells, the Daedra Priest will utilize the many forms of elemental Atronachs: Flame, Frost, Storm, or Ash, depending on the situation. The Storm Atronach works well with the Daedra Priest's destruction spells, as it is not only invulnerable to the effects of shock magic, but it will carry the contagious effects of Chain Lightning for you without any drawbacks. This way you can attack your own Atronach in order to damage others nearby. As for perks from Conjuration, we suggest taking both of the outside branches up to and including Twin Souls and Expert Conjuration. The left branch is essential for getting the most out of your Atronachs. Some notable benefits include Twin Souls, which allows you to have two Atronachs at the same time, and Elemental Potency, which will make them 50% more powerful in battle. The right hand branch will allow you to cast all of your Expert, Adept, and Apprentice conjuring spells at half of the magicka cost. From Destruction, the center branches, beginning with Augmented Shock and Apprentice Destruction, are the areas of the skill tree the Daedra Priest needs. Augmented Shock will power up shock-based destruction spells by 50%, and Disintegrate will have the chance to literally disintegrate enemies who have low health. Similar to Conjuring, going up to the Expert perk gives you a 50% magicka cost reduction when casting Expert, Adept, and Apprentice level spells, as well as Novice level spells. In regards to enchanting, the primary enchantments the Daedra Priest will use are Fortify Destruction and Fortify One-Handed. Therefore, the middle branch of the enchanting skill tree is ideal to reap the most rewards from your enchantments. Insightful Enchanter offers a 25% enhancement to skill-related enchantments, and the extra effect perk will allow you to put two enchantments on the same item. From One-Handed, you'll want to max out the beginning perk Armsman for the general 100% bonus to one-handed effectiveness. After that, the only other perks to take are Fighting Stance and Savage Strike. Fighting Stance will make power attacks with one-handed weapons cost 20% less stamina, and with Savage Strike, standing power attacks do 25% bonus damage and have a chance to decapitate enemies. So with these perks, you'll have more energy to fire off power attacks, and they'll pack some serious punch. For heavy armor, as we mentioned before, it's all about getting the most protection from each piece of Daedric armor. 5 points in the Juggernaut perk will double the armor rating for all heavy armor. That should be sufficient enough to keep the Daedra Priest alive, regardless of what circumstances present themselves. The other heavy armor perks will not be useful for the setup of this build. Last but not least is smithing. From this tree, you'll want to invest in the Arcane Blacksmith perk. That way you'll be able to improve all of the gear you augment with enchanting, or that which you find which is already enchanted. Aside from that, the right branch should be taken until you're able to forge Daedric armor. The Daedric smithing perk will also allow you to improve Daedric pieces twice as much. With all of the Daedra Priest's perks, spells, and skills laid out, how should you use them to get the most out of his assets? Well, this build revolves around sending conjured allies into the fray before bringing unrelenting carnage with your shock magic, mace, and other Daedric artifacts. Firstly, we suggest summoning a Dremora or two with a conjuration spell or through using Sanguine's Rose. Alternatively, you can summon 2 elemental Atronachs of your choice, then switch to Destruction Shock Magic in your left hand and a mace in your right hand. Most of the time, this mace will either be an enchanted Daedric mace or the Mace of Molag Bal. However, these can be switched out for other weapons like Dawnbreaker or the Wabberjack depending on your situation and strategy. So the Daedra Priest uses a variety of spells and hoards all kinds of mystical artifacts, so there's undoubtedly a lot of potential for variety with this build. With all of that in mind, let's have a more in-depth look at his gear. For apparel, the Daedra Priest will wear Vaymina's robes. We chose these for their interesting aesthetic and link to Daedric worship. You can enchant these yourself and rename it whatever you like so you don't break roleplaying. You may not want to represent Vaymina so strongly, and you can avoid doing this by using this method. On his arms and legs, he'll wear Daedric gauntlets and boots. With the effects of enchanting, smithing, and heavy armor perks, they're all going to soak up a lot of the Daedra Priest's incoming damage, and your armor rating will be much higher than you expect, especially if you take advantage of smithing and enchanting potions. Top this aesthetic off with any ring and necklace you want for enchanting purposes. The enchantments you'll want to apply to every item possible are Fortify Destruction and Fortify One-Handed. On other slots where this is not available, we'll leave the choice up to you. Just consider what kind of thing you personally would find the most helpful during your playthrough. As for weapons, excluding spells, you'll want a Daedric mace, also smithed up for optimal damage and enchanted however you want. We chose to add shock damage and the chance to paralyze. You'll also want to carry every weaponized Daedric artifact you can get your hands on. The ones you'll want to use most of the time as they make the most sense are the Mace of Molag Bal, the Black Star, and Sanguine's Rose. Not only does the Mace of Molag Bal look absolutely awesome, but it has a high base damage with a unique effect dealing 25 damage to stamina and magicka. Additionally, if the target dies within 3 seconds, it will feel a soul gem. Remember, to know more about this awesome weapon, check out the link in the description to Camelwork's channel. This ability is perfect for charging the Black Star artifact as well. The Black Star will be the primary means for recharging all of the Daedra Priest's enchanted weapons. And lastly, Sanguine's Rose will summon a Dremora to fight alongside you when the going gets tough. The Black Star will charge Sanguine's Rose too, so these 3 artifacts combine well together. Feel free to cycle through other artifacts depending on the situation. As mentioned, Dawnbreaker is a great option when you're going up against the undead, as when you kill one it can cause a big explosion which harms others. Wabberjack is another Daedric artifact you can use. It's great for a less serious encounter, but it can be used on very powerful enemies, as you can transform them into much weaker targets such as a sweet roll. You should Google all of the effects of this weapon because they're way more extensive than most people know. The Mask of Clavicus Vile is a go-to when haggling with merchants. Also, remember to use the artifacts of the Daedric Prince you are loyal to as well, unless it's seriously not appropriate to use or can't be used in combat. Subscribe for more amazing remastered Skyrim Special Edition builds. This was the Daedra Priest, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to share it and give it a like if you haven't already. Don't forget to head on down to the comments to have your say in which remastered build we do next. Just thumb up our comment of either the Paladin or the Druid. Also check out the description where you'll be able to find links to Camelwork's channel and his guide on the Mace of Molag Bal. Thank you so much for watching. As always guys, I've been Michael and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.